The images and stories we're going to share with you over the next bit took place over the last 20 years with National Geographic, being on assignment with them all over the world. And when you saw in the video, more recently in the last 10 years, with our nonprofit called Sea Legacy. But every story has a beginning. And for me, when I was 4 years old, my family moved to Baffin Island in the Canadian Arctic, where we were one of 3 non-Inuit families in a community of 190 people. We never had a telephone, we never had a television, so there was really no excuse to spend time inside. All of our time was spent outside with the ice and the snow were my sandbox, and the Inuit were my mentors and my teachers. And it's funny, when you grow up with this environment, it's so extreme, you either fall in love with it or you hate it. I loved every second of it. This is camping. I don't know what your family camping trips look like. This was us. It's minus 30, we're in a nice tent, and we have huskies out there that are our early warning system for polar bears coming through camp. But I knew I was going to do something someday that had to do with protecting the polar regions because I loved it so much. The obvious thing seemed to be to go off and become a biologist. And I worked on polar bears and all these different species, but I got very tired very quickly of turning the beauty of nature into data points on a piece of paper. And I thought, what can I do? And also we were managing all the rights of hunters. And I'm like, how do I make a difference? How do I become value add? I thought, if I can just get a job with National Geographic, and then for the rest of my life, I'm just going to put faces and names to the species that are being affected most by our changing planet. And for example, polar bears. This is a 1,000-pound male at home in the ocean. They're marine mammals diving under some ice, but they need ice in order to survive. Or to kneel at the feet of Craig the elephant, a very famous 52-year-old elephant, one of the last 20 super tuskers in the world. There are only 20 left, and yet if Craig walks 10 kilometers or 10 miles to the south into Tanzania, trophy hunters can hunt him and legally kill him. So of course, when you look at these animals, you're going to fight for them. Or to dive down 50 feet deep, holding my breath, my lungs burning, staring into the eye of this humpback whale, mother and her calf, right before they begin the long journey back to Antarctica to feed on krill.
Well, my childhood didn't have any polar bears in it. I grew up in the wildness of Mexico City. And like Sahil's mother, I wanted to break the mold and be an explorer, but of course that's not expected of Mexican girls. So I would beg my mother to please take me on exploration, and here we are in Lake Xochimilco, downtown Mexico City, which is one of the most polluted lakes in the world, but I swear to you that in my childhood imagination, there were manatees and crocodiles here. And for me, it was all about the incredible pleasure of just spending time in the wild with animals, creatures like this. Ravi, have you seen these? This is a rain wolf or a sea wolf. Only occurs in the Pacific Northwest. It's a subspecies of wolf. 90% of its diet comes from the ocean. And you think that an animal so special would be protected, but it isn't. So for $5, you can buy a license to kill it, to hunt it. So one of the things we do is we sell our photographs, we raise money, and for this particular species, we bought all the hunting licenses in an entire 10 years. And now if the hunters want to kill them, they have to call us. Or animals like these are greater flamingos in southern Mexico. They seem fragile, but they're really badass birds. And this is a mother puma with her cub, and she's teaching her baby how to become the top predator in Patagonia. And one of the first things you learn when you want to be a wildlife photographer is that animals don't always want to have their picture taken. But we risk our lives to bring back images like this. Because in our planet, all the creatures, the big and the small, they're equally important. They're the building blocks of life on Earth. Now, what my heart desired was to become an underwater photographer. And it's expensive, it's dangerous, I didn't know how to do it, but sometimes where there's a wish, there's a way. And for me, it's all about telling stories like the story of this animal. This is a loggerhead sea turtle. We found it in the North Atlantic in the Azores. And I had the opportunity to swim all around her. She didn't move. And she had a little tag on her fin. That tag told me that this turtle was born in West Palm Beach, Florida, 5,000 miles from where we found it. And one day, this turtle, for reasons that only she knows, will make a U-turn, and she will swim 5,000 miles to the same beach where she was born. How do animals know this without AI, without GPS? Anyway.
And this is me in my office. This is where I get to go to work. I've heard a couple complaints about the AC today. I'm probably the wrong guy for you to tell about. But it's extreme. It's 28 degrees Fahrenheit in this water, as cold as salt water can get. But it's where I know I can do my most important work, where I can connect this icy realm to the rest of the world. And to do stories like this, I actually have about a 98% fail rate. When I wake up in the morning and I say, I'm going to shoot a great picture today, there's a 98% chance I'm going to fail. But National Geographic would remind us all the time that they're a magazine, that they publish pictures, not excuses. So you have to persevere. And I sat there for 5 years, every year on the sea ice, trying to figure out how I was going to get these pictures of narwhals, because nobody else in the world was getting them. And I finally realized I needed to buy an ultralight airplane, learn how to fly it, ship it up to the Arctic, assemble it, and just live on the sea ice with it for season after season. And finally, near the end of the project, we only had 2 good days of shooting out of 5 years of trying, and we were able to fly over pods of narwhals like this, or land next to a big pod in the ice and be able to reach out and almost reach their tusks. And it just was just one of the more profound moments, especially after failing so much. When you finally succeed, it feels so good. This is the little airplane that I was flying around in with my buddy Brian. And here our engine has failed, and we're getting instructions from Rotax on how to install the new motor. And I ended up crashing this airplane and destroying it on impact, and got pretty hurt. I know Rich Rolls here has had a back problem. I've just got my shoulder replaced because of the accident, so I'm your brother in pain. And but then I thought it was such a powerful moment to be able to see nature from above, that I bought a new airplane, and I was using it on a new assignment with a better engine, better outfit and everything. So this is that airplane. So I'm proud to report I've crashed 15 drones, and none of that hurt. But honey, I haven't told you this. Last week I bought an airplane, and it's being shipped to Africa, and I'm excited for you to fly with me.
Well, I follow you anywhere. Over the last 200 years, humanity has migrated towards the cities, and we have divorced ourselves from nature. But there's a group of people that are, even though they make 5% of the world's population, they're still stewarding the remaining 80% of biodiversity. And whereas in Inuit people in the Arctic, or the people in the Omo Valley, the Suri people in the Omo Valley, they live by an ancient wisdom that is not written on textbooks. It's passed from generation to generation through story and song and ritual. And these are the instructions for survival. And for them, it really is a matter of life and death. And whether they're reading where the wind is going, or where the rain is coming, or where the migrations of animals, the most important question they're trying to answer is, how do we leave enough for the generations still to come? And what I love about BEST, working with Indigenous people, is that Sahil was telling us this morning, they have a built-in sense of enoughness. And Indigenous people all around the world are already confronting the ravages of climate change. So whether there's fires or melting ice or USAID pulling out, humanity is abandoning them to protect the last ecosystems on planet Earth on their own, and we owe them better.
All the work we do is at the intersection of art, science, and conservation. It has to be beautiful, powerful. It has to live on forever in a magazine. Once we get an image sharp and in focus and just the way we want, that doesn't mean our work is done. It's now time for that image to go on and work forever in representation of the issues that we're fighting for. So it has to be able to live on a wall. This is my best-selling big fine art print, which is great because it fuels us to keep us out there shooting and telling more stories. It has to be based on science and not just popular opinion. And it has to drag people into the conversation on conservation. Then that image is really in full service. And it's amazing when Pearl Jam, Eddie Vedder phoned me one day and said, hey, we want to stick that image on the cover of Pearl Jam. And we were learning about echo chambers earlier the other day, and this was powerful when we get dragged out of our echo chamber by just having a new audience, and we've done a bunch of stuff with Pearl Jam now, and it's been a great relationship. And a polar bear. I was sitting in the Arctic at this little table. There's a big blizzard raging outside. I'm sitting there alone, and making some notes. It's minus 40 out, it's the white out, it's nasty, and I'm just sitting there taking notes, and I look up in the window, and there's a polar bear staring at me. And I did what you would all do. I opened up the window, and I greeted her, and then I realized actually she could fit through the window, and she was smelling the smells coming from my little cabin, and she wanted to come in, But I also knew that this was an incredibly important image. So I lit that lamp, which hadn't been lit since Amundsen had been there 100 years earlier. And I have to keep her distracted to keep her from coming through the window. And I thought the only way I can get light on her face is my laptop was sitting on my sleeping bag. So I picked that up and I held it about a foot from her face just to fill in the shadows, because it's such a powerful image to talk about polar bears coming into conflict with humans. This chart, we normally don't show a lot of graphs, and no, this isn't my stock portfolio with Google AI at the end, shooting it off the end, but unfortunately, this is the carbon dioxide parts per million in the atmosphere over an 800,000 year period being measured from the ice core samples coming out of Antarctica. And when you talk about the natural cycles of life, and then you look at this, and you look at the Industrial Revolution, and of course, there's hundreds of thousands of wars have happened all during this time, but if we don't address climate change and our warming planet, not much else is really going to matter in the end. I also want people to realize, when you look at a situation like this of a polar bear, when scientists say polar bears are going to disappear in the next 100 years, that just isn't data falling off sheets of paper. Really, this is what's happened. We've already lost 70% of the biodiversity on this planet, and we're going to continue to lose a lot more if we don't start tackling the real issues. It's pretty hard to watch.
Yeah, so as the planet's getting warmer, but for the ocean, it would already be 30 degrees hotter than it is today, because the ocean has absorbed 90% of the heat in the atmosphere due to greenhouse gases. And the price that the ocean pays is massive. This year, we saw bleaching, the dying of corals, in 85% of the corals on the planet. In the next 50 years, there will be no coral reefs left. So we've already condemned our children to a planet without reefs. And of course, it's not just the heat, it's also the stuff that we're dumping in the ocean. Every year, humans put in 8 million metric tons of plastic. This is our Christmas holiday in Bali. We saw it on Instagram, Jimbaran Beach, these waves of plastic coming in. We had 1,000 volunteers picking trash up with us. The next day, there was another wave that came in. We need to do something about this.
But there is good news. Tell them about the high seas.
Oh, a couple of weeks ago, the United Nations General Assembly, the High Seas Treaty, was ratified by over 60 countries. We have agreed to protect the areas beyond national jurisdiction, and that is huge news.
I can tell you, seeing your images published in magazines or hanging them big on the wall, that all feels really good, but nothing tastes and feels as good as a major conservation win. We were called into action here in Norway, where a whole bunch of interest groups were trying to keep big oil out of the Lofoten region, which is home to 2,000 orcas. So we came up there and we did the visual storytelling, and that we were able to have a moratorium on oil drilling and seismic exploration in this area. Or we were asked by the First Nations to get involved in the Great Bear Rainforest of British Columbia. It's never us alone. It's always a team effort. But to be able to keep the Enbridge pipeline out of this area, sure, we need to worry about our economy. Sure, we need to move oil. But sometimes you don't need to move it through the most pristine ecosystems on the planet. Or in the Yukon, we are able to protect 15 million acres of habitat. And when the Supreme Court judge held up our article in National Geographic and said, this is what we're fighting for, that's the stuff that feels the best when you're a conservation photojournalist.
And so when people say, why the ocean? The answer is pretty simple. The ocean is the largest, the most defining ecosystem on planet Earth. It not only moderates our climate, it feeds billions of people, and it is the engine of life on Earth. And all of it starts with plankton. Plankton is a miniature rainforest floating in the ocean. A lot of creatures in the ocean start their lives as little eggs or larvae floating invisibly, and some of them grow up to be big, like these jellyfish, but together they're producing about 50% of the oxygen we breathe. Do we know what's happening to these very delicate microscopic creatures as the ocean gets warmer and becomes more acidic? I think it's pretty big stakes for humanity, so we need to find out. And we're just learning, the role that big animals like these humpback whales and all the other big whales play in the carbon cycle. When a whale dives deep and feeds and then comes up to the surface and poops, what it's doing is that rich fertilizers, potassium and nitrogen, is fertilizing the plankton. It's absorbing carbon dioxide and it's exhaling oxygen. So the ocean is pretty important to all of us.
And Katie and John learned more about the poop loop than anybody else would ever want to know. But.
we got blue whale poop.
But at the end of the day, we just absolutely love what we do. We call these our deathbed stories or our deathbed moments, because when you're on your deathbed, you're not going to be surrounded by, you're not going to be worried about your wealth or your money or what's hanging on the wall for awards. You're going to be worried about, hopefully, the family and friends that you've built along the way, and also these incredible memories. And for us, our deepest memories, our reverence that we have is for nature. And one of my greatest moments was being tragically, a scientist was killed by a leopard seal in 2003. And it was on all the news, and so I put a story forward to National Geographic to go to Antarctica and get in the water with as many leopard seals as I could to see if they are these vicious monsters or if they are misunderstood. And you can look at them. They are 1,000-pound seals. They're 12 feet long, and they are curiously aggressive. The second you roll out of the side of your dinghy, they're there waiting for you. And these big leopard seals do these lunge displays. But again, you've made these promises to the magazine, so you're thinking about f-stops, shutter speeds. You're thinking about your lighting. You can't be worried about excuses. And so at this point, you're getting these shots, but then I was terrified, to be honest with you, to have this big seal lunging at me like this, not knowing what's going to happen. But then this big female leopard seal, she calmed down, and she started at first to bring me live penguins, and she would just drop them off and they'd swim away. And she did this for a long time. And then she started to bring me, weak and tired penguins, and then she started to bring me dead penguins, like this one here. And then at one point, I had 5 dead penguins floating around my head, and she's just sitting there staring at me with this dejected look on her face, so that she's looking at this inept predator who's going to starve in her ocean. And so now she's OCD obsessed to really try and get me to eat. And then she started to flip penguins on top of my head, and she would just have them draped over my head, and then I'd have her whiskers tickling my chin and tickling my cheeks, and then she'd be poking me in the ribs, just trying to get me to eat. So I went from the absolute fear to my mask flooding with laughter, because it was the most profound experience I had ever had. And then on the 4 days of this, like when I would go to bed at night, she'd meet me at my boat. You could hear her breathing all night. In the morning, she'd be there. But by the 4th day, she was getting tired of my uselessness, and she started to get frustrated and blow bubbles in my face. And so for me, it was just one of the most powerful moments I've ever had in nature.
Yeah, so we've been doing this for a long time, 30 years, and the biggest lesson we have learned is that everybody seems to think that governments or NGOs or indigenous people somewhere are going to do something about the mess we're in. And now I've been living in Canada for 15 years, and I'm learning how to be Canadian. So I came up with this acronym. It stands for Someone Else Is Likely Fixing It, eh? And it's a reminder that nobody's coming to save us. It's going to be on each and every one of us. And as governments abandon our climate targets and philanthropy recedes from biodiversity, all I want to say to you is pick an animal, pick an issue, pick an organization, I don't care which one, and just donate with both hands fully. The return on investment will be the future of life on Earth. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.